It was 1983, and the world was one false alarm away from ending. Inside a dimly lit Soviet command center just outside Moscow, a lone man sat surrounded by blinking red lights in a low mechanical hum. His name was Stanislav Petrov, a mid-level officer with tired eyes and a quiet sense of duty. And in front of him, a single word flashed on the screen: launch. According to Soviet satellites, the United States had just fired nuclear missiles toward the USSR. The alarms were blaring. The computers confirmed it. Protocol demanded he report it immediately, triggering an automatic retaliatory strike. Within minutes, hundreds of missiles would launch back toward America. Petrov stared at the screen. His finger hovered over the phone that would start the chain reaction. He had seconds to decide. And he hesitated. That hesitation, that single act of doubt, may have saved the world. Petrov wasn't supposed to be there that night. The man assigned to monitor the early warning system had called in sick, so Petrov, a 44-year-old lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, filled in. The Cold War was at its most dangerous point since the Cuban Missile Crisis. NATO had just begun a massive military exercise in Europe, Operation Able Archer, designed to simulate nuclear war. To the Soviets, it looked like preparation for a real first strike. Inside Moscow's corridors of power, paranoia was not a flaw, it was policy. The KGB had orders to detect signs of an American sneak attack. Every radar ping, every test flight, every radio silence, all of it could be the start. Petrov knew this. Everyone in his position did. And that night, he sat in the Serpukhov 15 command center, deep underground, watching for the one event everyone feared, but no one truly believed would happen. Then it happened. The sirens screamed, red lights flashed, the computer declared, "Missile launch detected." Petrov froze. He knew what the manual said: report it immediately. If confirmed, the Soviet Union would retaliate with full nuclear force. But something didn't add up. The system showed just one missile. One, then another, then three more. 5 total. 5 missiles. That was strange. If America were really launching a first strike, why only 5? Why not hundreds, thousands, enough to cripple the Soviet arsenal? Petrov felt his stomach tighten. The data said attack. His gut said error. He could hear his crew whispering behind him, waiting for his order. Their training told them to trust the machines. The satellite system known as OKO was new, cutting edge, supposedly infallible. But Petrov had helped design parts of the system. He knew its flaws. Sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds could fool the sensors. He'd seen false alarms before, though never this convincing. He had to choose, believe the machine, or believe his instincts. 5 minutes. That's all he had before the supposed missiles would strike Soviet soil. He stared at the blinking warning. Launch confirmed. His phone was ready. One call, and the Soviet chain of command would prepare to respond. He pictured what that meant: the counterattack, the retaliatory firestorm, cities gone, tens of millions dead, maybe everyone. And he did. Nothing. He picked up the receiver, reported a system malfunction, and told his superiors it was a false alarm. Then he waited. Every second after that was torture. If he was wrong, nuclear war had already begun, and he had just doomed his country by doing nothing. The crew around him watched the clock. They expected the missiles to hit in 20 minutes. 20 minutes came. Nothing. No explosions, no seismic reports, no confirmation of attack. The room fell silent. Then, relief. Petrov exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour. He had been right. The system had malfunctioned. The missiles were just sunlight reflections off clouds near Montana. But his decision wasn't heroic in the moment. It was terrifying. He had directly violated Soviet protocol, an act of insubordination that could have ended his career, even his life. He didn't sleep that night, or the next. When Soviet investigators reviewed the incident, they didn't praise him. They interrogated him. They scolded him for not filling out the paperwork correctly. His commanding officers were furious that he hadn't followed procedure, even though following it might have triggered global annihilation. No medals, no honors, just quiet disgrace. In the USSR, Heroes who saved the world didn't make the news, especially if they embarrassed the system. Petrov was reassigned, demoted, and eventually retired early. He lived the rest of his life in a small apartment outside Moscow, on a modest pension, often alone. His wife died young. He never became famous, not until decades later, when the story finally surfaced after the fall of the Soviet Union. But to understand just how close we came, you have to see what the world looked like in 1983. Ronald Reagan had just called the Soviet Union the evil empire. The US had deployed Pershing 2 missiles in Europe, weapons that could reach Moscow in under 10 minutes. The Soviets, in turn, shot down Korean Air Flight 007, killing hundreds of civilians after mistaking it for a spy plane. Trust was gone. Everyone expected war. And then, just weeks after Petrov's decision, NATO launched Able Archer 83, a massive war game so realistic that Soviet intelligence believed it might be cover for a real nuclear strike. For days, Soviet bombers were fueled and armed. Nuclear submarines took positions. The Kremlin was on edge, ready to retaliate at the first sign of attack. If Petrov had followed protocol that night, the retaliation might have started long before anyone realized the alarm was false. His choice didn't just prevent a mistake, it bought the world time. Years later, when asked how he made the decision, Petrov said something simple. "I just didn't want to be the one responsible for starting World War III." That's it. No grand philosophy, no moral declaration, just human hesitation in a system built for destruction. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He thought of himself as a man doing his job, except in his case, that job meant deciding whether humanity lived or died. And what's remarkable is how fragile that moment really was. One tired officer, one untested satellite, one instinct against protocol. That was the line between peace and oblivion. In the years after, Petrov faded into obscurity. His story only emerged in the 1990s when a retired Soviet general mentioned it in an interview. Western journalists tracked him down in a small town, living quietly, smoking cigarettes on his balcony. They asked if he ever thought about that night. He said yes, every day. But he didn't feel pride, only exhaustion. "I was just at the right place at the right time," he said. When he died in 2017, few people noticed. No state funeral, no global headlines. Just a brief note from a Danish filmmaker who had made a documentary about him years earlier. Stanislav Petrov has passed away. The man who stopped World War III, gone, almost unnoticed. It's strange to think that history can pivot on something so small. A pause, a doubt, a human moment inside a machine. We like to think wars are prevented by treaties or politicians or brilliant strategies. But sometimes it's one person, one weary man sitting in the glow of a monitor, trusting his gut over a computer. Petrov's story is not about glory, it's about restraint. He didn't press the button, he didn't follow the rules. And that disobedience, that quiet, human resistance to blind obedience, might be the only reason we're here to tell the story. Because on that September night in 1983, the world came within minutes of ending, and no one outside that bunker even knew. And one soldier, tired and uncertain, decided that maybe, just maybe, the machine was wrong. He was right.